the reaction that business owners have when they truly understand what their culture is versus what they think it is, they're always shocked. Apple and Google, they also have it right. Apple has an unbelievable culture of fanatic fans all over the planet. Good morning, this is Barry Saltzman. I am very excited to have Lyle Banks with me today. Welcome.
Thank you, nice to meet you.
Looking forward to our dialogue. It's always exciting to talk to an interim CEO and find out how did you choose this profession and what makes you different and unique in the marketplace. So before we get into some fun dialogue, give us a 30-second background on who you are and how you came into this line of business.
I've been in media all of my life, for the most part. I've been running or owning television stations for about 25, 30 years. And also digital assets, and I've been in healthcare for also 15 years. Been on boards of major hospital groups and systems in Chicago, and so I've gotten to be an expert at that as well. But there was an interesting moment at my role at NBC, which was owned by GE, and I noticed that many of the executives that were successful and continue to be successful were being freely placed in different industries within GE. So if you were a high potential executive, you had to do a role in plastics or healthcare or aircraft engines. And then I realized, wow, what a fascinating situation that is to be able to work through all of those different industries, be successful. And then I realized that actually to do that, you have to have skills that are transferable among those. So that always drove me to want to be able to grow those skills, to be able to apply those to just about any business out there.
Oh, that's awesome, yeah. So when you go into an account or to a new situation, what's typically the reason why?
The typical reason is they're having some struggle with, it's usually revenue. They're not generating either the sales, the revenue, the market share that they expect. And I found that in most cases, the answer is typically found sort of inside the company or the problem is.
Right.
And my expertise has been in sales and also growth strategies. So it's very easy for me to go into a situation and diagnose it quickly and figure out what are the disconnects between your strategy and what's actually happening in the marketplace and how to connect those gaps and then move the company quickly forward.
Right. So from a culture perspective, obviously, you're the new guy in, you're there for a reason. Typically there's a challenge, there's an issue, there's a dysfunction.
That's right.
And you show up. And then there's a legacy organization that's there. How do you handle that, kind of the softer cultural side of you're the new guy, you're there to produce results for the boss, whoever the boss is. How does that work from a culture perspective?
It's a very important question because culture to me is the key. And the right culture really comes from the right leadership. And I've made my mistakes in the past and I've experimented and I've learned a lot about leadership, and I consider myself a real great student of that. So for me, coming in and generating trust among the stakeholders is a very, very important thing. Letting them know that I really understand what they're going through, that I've been through that, that I'm walking in their shoes and I'm there to try and help.
Right.
So generating that trust and empathy and ensuring that everything I do is based around transparency and authenticity and sharing and communication, I think right off the bat makes people feel that they're part of this, that they're part of the change or part of the solution, and I usually wind up getting results a lot faster with that approach.
It's kind of like the needle in a haystack. Somewhere within the haystack of the organization, the answers are there, sometimes.
I think most of the time it is. Yes.
Yeah. So how long is a typical engagement for you? You get brought in, how long does it last?
I'd say the typical engagement is about 3 months, maybe 5, 6 months. Some are as little as a month, some could last a year, but I'd say 3 to 6 months is about the average.
And then when you get to the tail end of the engagement, are you typically bringing in and mentoring a replacement?
Sometimes that is the case. Sometimes part of the role as the interim is to figure out what are the skills that are required for the new CEO, to come in and you help define, for the organization who the new person should be. So that can be part of it. That has been part of it many times.
Right, so you're like the special forces. You've got to kind of fly in and save the day and then do your work, produce a result. You're done, then you move on to the next one.
That's right. It's funny because that's the key between being an interim and any other kind of temporary executive or even a consultant. We're not consultants. Interims love taking on the risk and the challenge. I mean, we're operators. We're C-suite people that love to get into the mix and make the impact. And once that assignment is over, then we're ready for the next assignment. At least at some point.
Right.
But we're not hireable. We don't go into these gigs thinking that there is a permanent job at the end of the assignment. That's not how we're built.
Right. You just love the risk and love the challenge.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've done this for a few years.
Yes.
You've obviously been an executive for many years. Knowing what you know today, if you rewind to when you first said, I'm going to be an interim guy, I want to do that interim, what could you have done different or better in the beginning based on what you know today?
Started earlier. Really, it's a wonderful profession. I think starting, I say that because it's a great profession. The reality is this profession is still starting to catch on in the United States. Okay. In Europe, it's a big deal.
Okay.
In the U.S., it's coming there. It's not so much, but it's growing. It's something that it forces you to really understand what's important to you in your profession, who you are as a person, what motivates you, and working as an interim has helped clarify that. Okay. And that's been a godsend for me.
Right. So you need all the experience to have the ability to do this.
That's right.
But now that you're doing it, it's kind of cool if you would have done it earlier. So there's kind of a fine line between, right, you need the experience.
That's right.
So what industries do you typically like to serve? Other than obviously you're in media and that's your background, are there any other industries besides media that you feel comfortable in?
Well, I've been presented with assignments in industries that I've had no knowledge of, and been able to take a very short period of time to learn about them. And what I've found is the issues that those companies are facing are just very similar to other issues in other businesses that I've encountered. So there really hasn't been any challenge that's been insurmountable, at least at this point, for me.
Right.
What I have found, and I've been in the digital world for a long time too, is we're in this wonderful but challenging digital cycle, this period of time. I mean, it'll go down in history as like the Iron Age or the Bronze Age. And it's creating so much disruption with almost every business out there. And every owner or every business that I encounter is facing some sort of disruption on some level of their business. But where there's disruption, there's also growth. Yeah. So one of my strengths is I see a lot of this, and I've lived a lot of this, and I've worked in industries and businesses where they have been disrupted or we've been disruptors. So being able to bring that perspective, into an organization, to me has been very comforting and valuable for the businesses that I've been able to talk with.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is, doesn't matter what the business is. I'm not coming in as the subject matter expert. I'm the subject matter expert of developing a strategy, bringing a team from dysfunction to function, creating some alignment and growth. And the experts are the experts in that particular discipline.
That's right. Because if you look at some of these businesses that are being disrupted, let's take healthcare. Let's take a livery. In fact, I was looking at a guy outside today that was on his phone getting Uber.
Uber, sure, yeah.
Major dysfunction in the livery,
yeah.
Industry. But these were people that didn't start out necessarily driving limousines. These were people that were trying to connect a consumer, with a particular service. And that's what's been happening across the entire globe. you don't need these days an expertise in any industry to disrupt that industry. And in healthcare, there are apps that are connecting patients with doctors that are disrupting hospitals. There's Walgreens and CVS that are supplying flu shots and taking business away from primary care physicians and providers in hospitals. Those aren't hospitals, but they're disruptors.
Yes.
So what's nice about being an interim is that you don't necessarily never really had to be an expert in those fields. You just had to be an expert in seeing the opportunities and being able to bridge what is that organization trying to do and how to do it and who's the consumer and how to reach that consumer and putting those pieces together.
Right, so objectivity is huge, obviously, than having a deep knowledge of something because you don't see things you can't see.
That's right.
So give me an example of the best project you've done. What was the outcome of your, what won the award for you as the best thing you've ever done as an interim?
An interesting project was working with a hospital that is a standalone hospital faced with the prospects of perhaps merging in the middle of lots of huge systems and trying to figure out how to grow. And knowing that you couldn't spend millions of dollars marketing your way to success and you couldn't cut your way into prosperity. So one of the things that I was able to help strategize and bring to them was, how do we own the customer if that's the case? And so I brought in a strategy to offer insurance. And it was a very radical strategy, at the time, but I brought in resources to further those conversations and create the action, and we created products. And within a very short period of time, that hospital was able to generate 4 points of market share through new enrollees in their health insurance plans as a result of that strategy. So they were able to increase market share dramatically in a way that they never considered it before and they couldn't have done through traditional means.
Right.
So I feel really great about that.
Yeah, what I love about your role is it's, you come in, you make some change, then you leave, and probably the results are not seen until after you've left in terms of the real growth.
That's true.
But you could sit back and say, hey, I played, it's like you got an assist.
Right.
Right. So on strategy, what as you were giving me that answer, what I thought about is how many times, or what percentage of the time are you actually creating the new strategy, or you're just asking the right questions and getting the strategy to come out of dialogue?
Boy, that's a great question. You have to ask the right questions all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even if there's a good strategy that exists, some of the questions might lead you to understanding that strategy may not really be shared or perhaps implemented, as effectively as needed. And so I think it really starts with the questions.
Right.
Sometimes, through asking those questions and getting answers, you do come up with, you have to come up with ideas
right.
that can either enhance the current strategy, modify it, or even come up with a disruptive idea that could make sense, that needs to be explored.
So, fine line between what you're doing and being like a prosecutor where you're asking these tough questions is to pull out this information, right?
You've got great analysis.
So say we're in a board meeting right now and, I'm chairman of the board, my company is dysfunctional, and I'm thinking of bringing an interim person. Your name comes up. What's the one adjective that you want to be associated with your name?
Impact.
Okay, there you go. That's a good one. So last question for you is, what advice would you give to the board as to why they should consider hiring an interim person versus a full-time person? What's the main reason why? Because you've been doing this now, you see the results.
Other than the obvious benefits of not having to pay somebody for years or have a full-time employee
right.
and benefits and that sort of a stress, you're really taking advantage of someone who has been successful in a lot of different roles that, and particularly in this case with the Association of Interim Executives, there's a small group of us. Right now it's about 53, 55 of us. And many of us have overlapping skills. So when someone hires someone like me, not only do they get the benefit of my expertise, but I'm able to tap into resources of the other 52 brilliant minds, that are of this sort of Navy SEALs-like team. So they get those resources as well. Interesting thing about boards and owners is, what I've found is there is no magic bullet.
Right.
When a problem occurs, that problem has probably started occurring a while ago. They may have noticed it, or maybe they're just noticing it. So it usually has been happening, and there's no one solution for it. And in many cases, part of the solution could lie within the organization. And I think having an objective outside person that has lived these issues is an invaluable asset to help bring those issues to light, and also help the organization understand that many hard questions have to be answered. A self-assessment of the organization. The boards and the owners really need to take a step back and answer some of these questions, such as, are they really ready to hear the truth about the situation? Right. What business are they really in? What problems are they really trying to solve? Are they prepared to invest in growth? It's easier for someone like me from the outside to challenge businesses with those questions, get the right answers, and then put together strategies to implement. It's much more difficult for someone that's in the woods to be able to be objective about their own problems.
Right, so being disruptive, being transparent, making a change, and then leaving, and then looking back and seeing the results is what you do for a living.
Exactly.
So Lyle's a great example of an interim executive, and if you're an organization out there looking to make a big difference, we've got a guy right here. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.